I want to play this next clip.
Hillary and I also agree that the establishment of a humanitarian zone in northern Syria with the provision of international human aid consistent with UN Security Council resolution that was passed in February 2014 would be a very, very good idea. And Hillary also has the ability to stand up to Russia in a way that this ticket does not. Donald Trump again and again has praised Vladimir Putin, and it's clear that he has business dealings with Russian oligarchs who are very connected to Putin. The Trump campaign management team had to be fired a month or so ago because of those shadowy connections with pro-Putin forces. Governor Pence made the odd claim. He said, inarguably, Vladimir Putin is a better leader than President Obama. Vladimir Putin's run his economy into the ground. He persecutes LGBT folks and journalists. If you don't know the difference between dictatorship and leadership, then you got to go back to a 5th grade civics class. I tell you what offends me.
Okay, that was okay. Now I remember why I marked that. Okay, so this is where Tim Kaine actually started coming for blood. He started coming for Mike Pence time after time after time. They've really honed this anti-socialist, not socialist, I'm sorry, this anti-Russian sentiment, right? And it was fascinating seeing Mike Pence try to actually attack Vladimir Putin as though he hadn't been speaking positively of Vladimir Putin. But in this section of the entire debate, it really devolved into who can speak the hardest against Vladimir Putin, right? And I think this actually worked in favor of Tim Kaine because clearly he had been prepared to do this for the rest of the night. That's all he did the rest of the night was to hit Mike Pence where it hurt on Vladimir Putin and on Donald Trump. All right, so here's the question. In regards to this what I consider to be the new Red Scare, I want to ask your opinion on this, and if you have any articles or data to support it or whatever, that's fine. But to what extent should we actually hold an aggressive stance towards Russia, towards Vladimir Putin? In what cases would you say we need to hold the line with Vladimir Putin versus this type of rhetoric is unnecessary and is detrimental to us having any type of meaningful progress, particularly in Syria with Vladimir Putin? I'm going to go to Brandon first.
I mean, I just don't think Vladimir Putin takes this kind of rhetoric very seriously. Like, I think that for us, we're so concerned with these kind of optics that we find it hard to believe that other people are not. So I think Vladimir Putin, he has an iron grip on Russia. He's not as sensitive to whether Tim Kaine hates him or Mike Pence is distancing himself from him. It's like, I don't think it's that personal to him. It's kind of surreal to me, actually, as someone who's born in the 90s, the early 90s, to see like the Red Scare come back so strongly in this electoral cycle. I mean, I wasn't around for the first Cold War. I wasn't around for like these kind of drills, but it's even when Russia was invading Crimea, it wasn't this bad. And it seems as though this the energy surrounding this election has made Russia, I don't want to say the new China, but it's just reemerged Russia as this big threat against American foreign policy that I just don't feel like it is.
Right.
I mean, I could be wrong. I just don't feel like Russia is. I mean, I say feel, but I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's not. I don't think that Russia is this huge threat to America that people are placing it as. I think that they have conflicting interests in the Middle East when it comes to funding, when it comes to Syria, and when it comes to a lot of other places like Iran. I think that they've been very aggressive in expanding their borders into Crimea, and that should be handled through international bodies and not with America waging war against them, either war in the media or war, like an actual war. Right. But it just comes across as being weird and surreal and quaint. And I don't think it's going to appeal to millennials because it
like it's a foreign language to you, right? And I get that. I was born in the 80s, so I remember the Berlin Wall falling, right? And I remember the general anxiety of America when it seemed like at the last minute we could still, even though this wasn't the 60s with Khrushchev and Kennedy, this was the 80s with Reagan and Gorbachev, we could still feel as though we could destroy ourselves. So there was a lot of anxiety in that time. So people who were old enough to have children during that time, this type of Red Scare tactic actually works with them. And I'm with you, though. To me, it's like, for what and how and for why? For why are you doing this? But I think you hit the nail on the head, and then I'm going to send it over to Hank, because this doesn't phase Putin any more than the Friday prayers in Iran calling for the death of America phases the average American president, right? Because we see it exactly the same way as Putin should see it. This is just domestic posturing, using foreign policy to make yourself look stronger at home. It's the exact same thing that Putin does. Putin has such a nationalistic fervor over there because he portrays America as the great enemy, and he benefits from that because domestically it makes him seem strong, and on the international stage it probably means much of nothing, because at the end of the day there's some things that we have in common, which are the markets, which is the ruling class, which is the oligarchy. There are things that we have in common that we are not going to go to war with each other, but we know the benefit, or the ruling class understands the benefit of this Red Scare because it still appeals to people of a certain age. Hank, you're the youngest out of all of us. What are your thoughts on the Red Scare that you saw tonight?
Well, I mean, obviously, I didn't really experience any of the Cold War that we see in history textbooks.
Yes,
but
I'm old.
I think that I think it's funny how scared and how all caught up people get in anything about Russia. I think that people have often been hearing, especially in baby boomers, I think they've been hearing about Russia, the big old evil Russian bear their whole lives, and I think I think they're used to being scared of it, and so why shouldn't they be now? I think that's what people get to, and I think that just in general, the United States has been on top of the world since the Second World War. And to have somebody challenging your position at the top, it's just human nature to be afraid of that force, however little of a threat it might be.
Yeah.
I think that also, well, Russia is definitely making aggressive moves in places like Ukraine and Syria. It's not like the United States is completely not at fault either. Yeah. You see us moving troops out, and you see troops moving in the eastern countries like Poland. You see, I think Lithuania, Latvia, one of the L countries up there. Mm-hmm. You see us supplying equipment to Ukrainian troops. So I think that Russia at the same time sees us as encroaching on their countries as well. So I think it goes both ways.
No, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. There was something I was going to say to that effect.
Well, can I interject real quick then?
Actually, I had the point, but go ahead before I forget it. Go ahead.
No, you go first then.
Yeah, because I'm getting old. Y'all are young. It really, the problem with that question, though, the problem with the question that I asked and the entire frame of this is whether or not the United States, to what extent do we accept America's global hegemony? Right, our right to be the global police officers, the global police force. Is that the role? Is that the accepted role that we are going to have in America? Or are we going to even challenge that frame and ask the underlying questions? To what extent should we even be controlling or trying to manipulate Russia's hegemony, because we're not going to allow Russia to manipulate our hegemony? And then what happens when we clash? They're natural outflows of our assertion of our strength on the global stage that is going to cause these types of conflicts and cause this type of friction. And unless we question that underlying assumption, then we're not really even getting to the meat of it. And I'm not saying that we have to completely undermine and remove all of our global empire, right? But is anybody even going to discuss that, right? And of course, again, on this stage, that's not something that they're going to remotely ask. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, what I would say, I would compare America to sort of like a Highlander, who feel as though they can be the only a unipolar world, so to speak. Like America is trying to go around the world and make sure it is the only superpower that exists. And that's been their goal since the Cold War. I would say it's been their goal really since the end of World War II, to have this sort of unipolar world where America sits at the top and finally accomplishes that whole beacon on the hill, shining light for the rest of the world kind of mentality. And when it comes down to like the global hegemony of the United States, I mean, at a certain point, you're not talking about the United States government. You're talking about the cultural and economic hegemony of the biggest businesses that exist within the United States, or at least have some sort of cultural ties to the United States. So at a certain point, how much are we just exporting capitalism?
Yeah.
As opposed to, putting bases places. Like, I think ultimately the goal we're talking about is America likes to export neoliberalism. It likes to export capitalism. It's not about instilling democracy anywhere
at all.
It's about putting McDonald's places.
Yep.
So I would say that America, at least within this debate cycle, within this electoral cycle, is in search of an enemy, because I think that people have gotten wise to the very small threat that Middle Eastern terrorism plays in Americans' day-to-day life. I think that China and the issues that we have with China from the economic standpoint are too complicated for most Americans to really be involved with the money manipulation and all X, Y, and Z. Most Americans aren't really engaging with that. But Russia is it's an old enemy.
Yeah, it's a familiar.
Ivan Drago.
Yeah. If he dies, he dies. Right.
It's a historical enemy.
I think that's so accurate, right? So accurate. We discussed that last night. The fact that this global empire is not a global empire for security; it's a global empire for the expansion of capitalism, right? That's really, and you nailed it down even further, the neoliberal iteration of capitalism, and that's really the point of it. So in this, and then I don't even know if I want to ask this question, because we would be here for the next month unpacking this, right? But the requirements of capitalism, our commitment to capitalism, our mutual interest with China and Russia and other great powers rather with capitalism, we have these. It's like we're in this cooperation, right? Cooperation / competition, but it inevitably is going to lead to these types of tensions and conflicts. And I think it's really, to be honest with you, it is a controlled opposition, right? It is exactly what you said, Brandon. We're shopping around to see which boogeyman is going to stick, because America is actually at a point where we're rejecting so many of the entire idea of a boogeyman, and we're starting to look at ourselves as the boogeyman. And that's, again, something that you are not going to get in this debate frame whatsoever. All right, last clip of the night, and then we're going to call it.